Hey everybody, Adam Guthrie here from I Feel Good magazine. And today I'm super excited because I have a special guest with us, Dr. Andrew Davies. Now, what's special about Dr. Andrew Davies is that he is an ICU, intensive care unit doctor. And why that's close to my heart is because, I was in ICU with a heart attack. And I know the sort of have experienced the work they do, and it's pretty amazing. So I'm pretty excited to chat to him today. But he's also got this amazing podcast called The New Normal Project, and I want to delve into that with him today as well to find out how that came about and what motivated him to do that. But what's also really cool about him, he's whole food plant-based, which is pretty rare to see doctors being whole food plant-based. So Andrew, welcome. Thanks for having a chat with me today, mate.
Pleasure, Adam. Great to talk to you. I only met you in the past from a speech you gave, and I loved hearing your story about how you went from the heart attack to an Ironman, and even better, I love what you're doing now with this magazine, or I don't know exactly what you call I Feel Good, but it's fantastic. Well done.
It's a magazine. Yeah, it's an online magazine. But yeah, thanks, man. So tell me, what inspired you to become a doctor? And especially in ICU, did you go straight into ICU? Is that what you wanted to do? Or?
Well, you start medicine as a general medical student, and then you gradually go through to become a specialist. I'm not sure why I really started medicine. I had a few medical conditions when I was a kid. I had a heart condition myself and had open heart surgery when I was 18. So I think when I was going to doctors a lot, it made me think maybe that's something that I'd like to do. I was also a bit of a nerd at school, and I was good at studying, so that got me good marks. And the next thing I knew, I was in medicine. I sometimes now wonder whether it was all a bit of a conveyor belt, though, and I just started it because it seemed the right thing to do and seemed a good profession. And I'm not sure that I really went into it with the idea to help people as much as I probably would like to think I'm doing it for now. Anyway, but that's how I got into medicine, and you get the marks, you start medicine, and next thing you're finished, and you're deciding what specialty or what career you're going to have in medicine. And I just loved the intensive care unit because that's where the sickest people in the whole hospital were. And they were the sort of patients that were most complicated, and to be perhaps a little bit egotistical, a lot of the other doctors in the hospital were what we call single organ doctors. They dealt with the heart, for instance, like you had, or they dealt with the bowel, or they were a surgeon for the appendix or something. But in intensive care, we treated all sorts of diseases, and you kind of felt like you were the doctor that could sort out other people's problems, other people's messes. And that was kind of fun to do. And now I've probably changed to loving it much more because it's such a people-focused job. You might think that's strange because a lot of the patients in intensive care are unconscious. We can't talk to them, but we end up talking a lot to their families. We often talk to the patient eventually when they wake up, but it's really about people and trying to help them as much as we can through a very traumatic time in their life with their health crisis, whatever it is. And sometimes, sadly, it ends up in people dying, and we can help them, comfort them through that period of time. So I really love it. It's a busy job, but I really enjoy it.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a big heart, mate, to be able to help people through those challenging times, because it's probably the most challenging time for people if they're in ICU, for the families and the patient. And, when I was in ICU, I felt very safe in there. I felt very comforted. And I think it takes a special person to actually work in there because I felt super nurtured. It's a skill set that you don't see elsewhere in the hospital. So is there a criteria in selecting doctors or nurses to enter that realm?
I think really it's people who like the challenge of looking after these sickest people, and there's no criteria to get in. No. But can I just say, it really is the nurses who are the I say angels, and that sounds a little bit sexist sometimes, but they're the angels of intensive care and really the whole hospital, because they're at the person's bedside hour after hour after hour. The doctors come and go a little bit. We can go and do other things, whereas the nurses are there. They're caring for the person. They're caring for their family. They're doing all those activities of what we call daily living, looking after their ablutions or whatever you call it. And so they're the ones that are special. And whilst the doctors, play a reasonable part, I really give a lot of credit to our nurses.
Yeah, no, that's true. They're always there. What was I found quite comforting was that even before I knew something was up, there was a nurse there and adjusting me or putting some wires on me or taking a test or asking me a question. And I started to twig, these guys are really monitoring me and they know what's happening inside me before I even know. So what sort of things, first of all, what sort of patients, what sort of illnesses, how do people end up in ICU? ICU is obviously, it's all about, the organs in the body. You sort of end up there if there's damage to those or there's danger to those. But what are the sort of diseases or illnesses that people end up in ICU for?
It depends on which hospital you work in, but I call myself a life support doctor. That's really what an intensive care doctor is. We're the ones who put people on the machines, like a respirator, a ventilator, or on medicines to lift the blood pressure up when the blood pressure is really low. So they're life supportive mechanisms. So the diseases we see are as simple as things who just have people who have a big operation. Someone who has their heart opened or maybe their abdomen opened for some big surgery and they need monitoring afterwards, as you had. Sometimes they don't need surgery. They have a heart attack like you. There are other people who have just an infection. I shouldn't laugh at it. It's someone, say, who has a pneumonia that's deep in their lungs. That can be enough to make them really struggle to breathe and they need to be on a ventilator. We also see people, not in my hospital anymore, but I used to work in a trauma centre, but trauma is clearly another major cause of need to come to intensive care unit. People who are in road accidents or even just fall. We get a lot of falls in hospitals. Elderly people, less elderly people that fall and hit their head or break their hip or injure their ribs, and they can end up in intensive care. So lots of different causes, and thankfully that's what keeps it fun, that everybody's different. And as you say, we need to be very closely monitoring the person, and so we do have a lot of screens and things around that help us, that are hooked to the person, so we can then try and notice when things are going awry before anyone else would notice, really.
Yeah, keep us alive. So
thank you. Well, look, a lot of people think that that's what we're doing, keeping people alive, and to a certain extent we are, but I think, in this whole, as we evolve in medicine, we're starting to realise the body heals itself the best, body given its own chance heals itself. And, that's actually not new wisdom. That's very ancient wisdom. And I think in the last 100 years or so, and particularly ICUs only have been around for about 50 years. In that time, we started to think we did it all. We were the heroes, without doctors who work in intensive care or in a hospital, we couldn't stay alive. But really, it's the body healing itself. And all we have to do in intensive care is support it. Let it have the opportunity to heal itself. Not everyone will heal itself, and about 1 in 6 of our patients will die, but the other 5 in 6, they'll survive. And so if we give them the chance by supporting them, monitoring them, giving them love and attention, compassion, that will give them the best chance to come good again.
Nice work, mate. So do you see any whole food plant-based patients come into ICU?
I wish I could say yes. It's pretty rare. So as you well understand, I'd say if veganism, which is not whole food plant-based, if vegan eating is probably 3 or 4% of the Australian community, then I think whole foods plant-based is much less, which means there's very few that I see eat that way. Sadly.
That is sad. So, you're whole food plant-based, vegan. When did you become vegan?
Yeah, it's not that long in my life, and it's probably about 4.5 years ago now. I actually had a bit of a burnout period where I got very stressed. I was doing a lot of research actually in my job. I also love the opportunity to test what things will make people have a greater chance of leaving the ICU and hopefully surviving. So I was doing a lot of research and I got a bit stressed, and so I had a period off from work. It took 12 months off actually, and in that time I needed to rethink my whole lifestyle. I was a bit chubby. I had stopped exercising. I certainly never heard of meditation. I was, just not sleeping very much or well. I had 10 years of probably getting 5 or 6 hours sleep a night because I thought that was cool and that's all you needed. So I needed to have a rehash of my life, and that's when I really thought about my nutrition. I'd always thought I ate pretty healthily, but I was a meat eater. And just as I read more books and more stuff on the internet, I just thought this is not the right way to be eating. And basically, it all came one day when one of my relatives, my wife's aunt, actually got Caldwell Esselstyn's book, How to Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease. And she was reading that because she had heart disease. And so she said, I'm going to try this. And I started thinking, I don't know if this is a good idea, but give it a go. And after a few months, she told me just how effective it had been for her in helping her heart disease. And the penny dropped for me. And I thought, I better read about this. And so having read that book and seeing a lot of YouTube stuff that Caldwell Esselstyn's done, and then also watching Forks Over Knives, that great movie. It really is a fantastic documentary to motivate change in my mind. That's when I changed. And my wife and I together, we actually watched Forks Over Knives. And I remember for those who haven't seen it, I'm sure most of your audience have seen it, but those who haven't, there's some great stories in there of people like you, Adam, who changed their whole life after a medical condition or with a medical condition by becoming whole food plant-based. And we watched the credits, rolling down, and we looked at each other and said, we've got to do this. And there and then we began our journey towards whole food plant-based. It wasn't immediate. We started dropped all the meat and initially kept fish, actually. We called ourselves pescatarians. But then one day I just couldn't eat it anymore, couldn't stomach it. I just didn't like the taste of the salmon that we would occasionally eat. And we dropped the fish and gradually became, closest to 100% whole food plant-based as we can be. I readily admit to people I'm not perfect. I'm probably a 95%er. There are times, when a piece of chocolate will be on the bench and I struggle not to eat it. But for most meals these days, it will be whole food plant-based. And I can't believe how much it's helped me. And I just want to be out there trying to tell people like you are, Adam, that this is a great thing for them to do to change their lives.
Yeah. So how has it changed your life?
Yeah, I wasn't that sick or ill, so I haven't got the great, story like you do. What I did notice, though, I was a runner, and I used to run marathons. I gave it up, though. I took 10 years off from doing it, and I developed a sore back, and every time I went out running, I would get, this terrible pain in my legs, that DOMS, as we call it, delayed onset muscle soreness. And so the moment I started plant-based eating, I noticed that just changed. My recovery from a long run, when I go out and do a 25-kilometre run on a Sunday, my recovery after that would be just amazing. I could run again the next day. Whereas when I was eating animal products, I would struggle to run again for 3 days. Really, you'd be so sore and you'd have to push through it. But that changed. And the second thing I really noticed was my hay fever. I was one of those kids who had a bit of hay fever in my teenage ages, and then after that it just continued. And I basically lived on antihistamines, on Telfast. I would have one of those a day. And every September, October in Victoria, when we get the peak pollen season, I'd get this outbreak. It'd be terribly worse, and I'd sneeze all the time, and sometimes even struggle to sleep because my nose was so blocked. And as soon as I started or began to drop dairy from my diet, that just went away, literally overnight. Within a week, I think, same thing. Within a week, I noticed that my nose wasn't blocked. And then I thought, maybe I'll stop taking the Telfast, take the pills that I've been living on for the last 30 years. And literally didn't need them anymore. So I really noticed that. I think so dairy, for those people who haven't discovered it, dropping dairy out of your life makes a huge change to allergies. And I don't have a lot of evidence for this now, but I'm starting to think that so many of the allergies we're hearing about in the world now, all these peanut allergies and allergies to like hay fever and even asthma itself, they're all versions of allergic diseases. And I would, if I was a person with any of those things now, I would try just a week dairy free to see how it would go, because I just think that the whole world's gone crazy with the consumption of dairy, and it's probably leading to a lot of the allergies that we have. Not all of them. I'm not going to say that it's going to fix every single one, but it certainly will help a lot of them.
Yeah, it's amazing, dairy. That must have been pretty exciting for you as a doctor to see that, I just removed dairy and I could stop these medications.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. I couldn't believe how quick it could be as well. That was really amazing.
Wow. So it's obviously improved your health. Do you still run? Is it?
Yeah, and now I can run, further and longer. I'll be honest, my story changed a little bit about a year ago because I was running and was feeling fit and doing well, but I started to lose a bit of weight and like more weight than I should have been for the level of fitness I was, and I was starting to get slower on my runs, and it was starting to worry me. And I went to my doctor, my plant-based doctor, Dr. Malcolm Mackay, and said, "Can you have a look at my blood tests?" And he said, "Maybe we'll test you for celiac disease." And I said, "Why would I have that?" He said, "Well, you look like you're iron deficient. I'd become iron deficient with over time." And I thought maybe I just wasn't eating enough spinach and all the things that have iron in them. But truly, I was very significantly iron deficient, and I had the positive antibody test for celiac disease. So I've actually found out that I've got celiac disease. I had to have a gastroscopy, and that's changed things as well. So I'm really whole foods, plant-based, gluten-free as well now, which is a bit more of a challenge than just being whole foods, plant-based, but actually not that bad.
It's not that bad. That's interesting because, I haven't been tested for celiac, but, I've been eating this way now 10 years. And as I've gone along, you've become really sensitive to foods that you eat. Your body becomes super in tune. And what I noticed, bread and pastas and the wheats started to really hurt my stomach. Like for some reason, it just hurt. And so I just started removing them, and I hardly eat any of the gluten products anymore. And my stomach feels amazing. So maybe I don't know, but I'm with you, man. I'm just whole food, plant-based with hardly any gluten.
Well, I wonder if there's a connection too. It's certainly crossed my mind and other people's mind that the fact that I became plant-based might have uncovered the celiac disease. Maybe it was low grade all my life, but it seemed to rapidly, come to prominence after I did that. I'm not sure if they're connected. They're probably not, but perhaps it is. And I'm with you. I've never liked bread. When I was a kid, Mum used to give me all these sandwiches at lunch, and I'd eat the middle of the sandwich and leave the bread. I didn't love bread. I have always loved pasta, I've got to say. So that's been a bit hard to drop the wheat-based pastas. But I'm so pleased that there are so many products now that are gluten-free pastas. And even in most Italian restaurants, you can get a gluten-free pasta these days. So it's not too bad.
No, it's not too bad at all. So how's your energy?
Yeah, my energy is very good. It's taken a little while to come back, and after the celiac disease diagnosis, and it's a year since I found out, and I've had to build back up again with the iron, and I even had to have an iron infusion. It was so low at one stage, which kind of I struggle with that philosophically, to think that I would need to have an iron infusion just to fix me up. But the more I thought about it, and this was sad to me, that I was actually malnourished, significantly malnourished from celiac disease. And this is despite eating a whole foods plant-based diet, despite being very interested in nutrition. I've been doing research on nutrition for critical ill patients, ICU patients, for 25 years. And so despite all my knowledge of nutrition, I ended up becoming malnourished, and this kind of didn't fit with me. But anyway, that's why I thought I'd better go with the doctor's view, which was to get an iron infusion and get myself back up quickly. And look, my energy's improved. I'm still not perfect. I hear so many people who literally go whole food plant-based and they unleash this boost of energy. I didn't really have that. I noticed, as I told you before, my recovery at running was much better, but I didn't get this massive boost. And I think that's because I've had this celiac disease in the background. So I'm expecting over the next 1 or 2 years to really find that boost of energy that will, take me to another level.
So how does celiac disease malnourish you?
Well, you literally have the lining of the bowel, the mucosa they call it, is really become very thin. And there's all these what we call villi that are sitting in the lumen, the hole in the bowel, and they're gradually absorbing all of the nutrients that come past, and they thin down to a tenth of the height that they usually are. So therefore, you've lost the capacity to absorb the nutrients into your body that you normally would. And some people say we've got like a equivalent of 2 tennis courts worth of surface area in the bowel to absorb nutrients. Perhaps in celiac disease, you've lost down to 1/10 or 1/5 of the tennis court capacity. So that's why you're struggling to get all the nutrients in. Your body's trying hard to absorb. It's not like you've got a problem in getting in using the nutrients in your body. It's just you can't get them in as quick as you can. So when you flood it with whole foods, plant-based, and a few supplements, which I have done over the last 12 months, now it's come back to normal.
That's good.
Yeah.
So anyone that's has celiac disease, you still recommend a whole food plant-based diet?
I do. I mean, for somebody who's just been diagnosed with celiac disease for the first time, they've got a big change to make. Dropping gluten, all the wheat, barley and rye products is a big deal. Dropping bread, dropping pasta, dropping so many things that have got wheat-based sources in them, that will be hard. I found it easy to change because I was already whole foods plant-based, basically eating vegetables and plants all day long. That was a lot easier to do it. So I think it's a challenge to change to this sort of thing, but it's not that hard to do. And I think I would value a whole foods plant-based diet for my celiac disease because if you eat that way, most of it does not have gluten. So therefore, you're making it easier for your body to not get that gluten inside it.
Yeah, and therefore, you can start absorbing nutrients again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because it's so diverse too. Yeah, it's a massively diverse amount of nutrients in all the plants that we don't get from animal products. So therefore, you're much more likely to recover from your new diagnosis of celiac disease by flooding it with all those nutrients.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that's interesting. I had no idea that was your case, your circumstances. But that's pretty cool. Look, there's not many doctors that really are into the whole food plant-based thought in regards to treating patients or preventing disease. And you're one of the few, and there's more and more happening. Despite all the evidence, why is it that so few doctors are picking up on it?
Yeah, I struggle with the same question a lot. We don't get a lot of nutritional knowledge in medical school, and a lot of people talk about that. We did get some. I'm not going to say we didn't get any. We certainly learned about all the biochemical processes that happen in the body to absorb protein or to deal with protein and fat and carbohydrates. So it's not like we don't know it at all. But a lot of the diseases that we treat, the focus is on interventions that are basically pills or procedures, as we say, surgery or medicines. And so we understand nutrition is important for some diseases. For instance, diabetes. You wouldn't be a doctor on the planet who doesn't realise that a good diet helps diabetes. But where they'll be confused is they may not know which would be the perfect diet, and they would say anything with low sugar would be a good way to fix that. So we hear about it, but I just think we don't focus enough on it in medical school. And then once you start in your job, it just perpetuates that problem, because when we go to conferences to learn, keep our medical education going, no one's talking about nutrition at those meetings. They're talking about the latest pill or the latest procedure or the latest series of cases that had some particular intervention. And so we just don't keep talking about it. So a lot of people bag the doctors that we don't know about nutrition. I think we're just too busy to notice it. And I think if we put it in front of them in a way that they will notice it, we will notice it, then we will start. See, I only noticed because I had a period of time off work and realised that I was not healthy enough, and I started to look at it. And I think if more doctors had the opportunity to see this material, then they'd be interested in it.
Yeah,
but that's hard. That's hard.
Yeah, it's like you're in a system that keeps you moving, keeps you active all the time, gives you no pause, and you can't discover this new information, or this information's been around for a long time. But you're changing that. You're involved with the Doctors for Nutrition, yeah?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Tell us about that. Tell us about the Doctors for Nutrition and your involvement, and what is the aim and purpose of that organisation?
Well, look, I'm really excited about Doctors for Nutrition. I'll be honest, I've been peripheral in its commencement. That's not been my role, but Helene Roux, a great doctor over in Adelaide, with Lucy Stegley, who I'm sure many of your viewers or readers in the magazine will know of. They've put together as co-founders this great charity, really, Doctors for Nutrition, which is about promoting education about plant-based eating, particularly whole foods plant-based eating, to doctors, but also the lay public as well. And hopefully eventually by helping create policy in various institutions in Australia and New Zealand mostly, but even worldwide, to try and get people eating whole foods plant-based, or at least better nutrition. And so it's really exciting. It's just sprung up in the last 6 to 12 months. And we're actually having our first conference this February, which is really exciting. And so in Melbourne, we should be hoping to get quite a lot of people, both from the medical industry, doctors and dietitians and other healthcare providers, but also lay people that want to come and listen to those of us who are trying to educate more about how a whole foods plant-based diet can help in medicine. Help with health conditions. That's really what we're after. People like you, Adam, who've had heart disease that's radically improved, people who've got cancer, people who've got diabetes, all these things that we know from evidence and from many anecdotes that with a whole foods plant-based diet, these people can have radical transformations. So that's what we're going to talk about at the conference. We're really delighted that Dr. Neil Barnard is a headline speaker. We've also got Dr. Scott Stoll, who's another great plant-based physician in the US, who's started the Plantrition Project, and they have a similar meeting over in the US. So these two, plus many of the local speakers, are going to be there, and we're really excited to just start that education and get people to start talking and thinking about how nutrition can be something that doctors care about. Now, whether we'll get a lot of doctors who aren't whole foods plant-based people at the meeting is going to be the greatest challenge. I hope we will get a few interested, but I do know that unfortunately the medical conference industry, so to speak, is so big these days. There are so many events. You could go to something every weekend if you wanted to. And weekdays, So hopefully we'll get them along and gradually start to change the way they're thinking about nutrition. I'm giving a long answer, Adam, but one other thing that I think is really valuable about Doctors for Nutrition is if we can get to the medical students. Get to the medical students, probably bad language. That sounds like we're trying to coerce people. I don't mean that, but if we could approach the medical students at many of the universities in our country, that would be a great opportunity just to start to tell them how important nutrition is. It doesn't have to be whole foods plant-based to start off with, but just to get them to focus on how nutrition might be able to help their patients, and then they'll learn about whole foods plant-based, and gradually we'll get them interested, and that can radically change things. If medical students are learning about it before they get on the treadmill of finishing medical studies and then going on to be a specialist, that could be the key. That's where we hope we'll get them.
Yeah, I think that's a wise move. Plant that seed and then water it and see it grow, because they're the next generation of healthcare professionals. The ones coming.
And the excitement, Adam, about that is right now they're starting to actually get interested in it already. I met a pharmacist recently who had a son at medical school, and he told me that his son went to one of the medical student conferences. They have a conference system for medical students about how to learn what you should learn and what your career is going to be like. He said that this pharmacist told me his son had gone to the conference and 50% of the people at that meeting were vegetarian.
Wow.
Now, when I went to medical school, 2% would have been vegetarian, and we didn't talk to them, those of us who ate meat. So that's a radical change in the time since I was a medical student 30 years ago. So I mean, it might be an exaggeration that 50% are vegetarian, but even if it's 30%, it's growing. They're interested, yeah.
And more people are eating plants or getting interested in that vegetarian, vegan movement. Instagram and the internet's had a big influence on that. But I think it's really good that Doctors for Nutrition, there's something started to just bring the awareness to, doctors that are already practicing that nutrition could be part of it. Because, one of my things was when I was told I was going to be on medications for the rest of my life, that really grated at me, and it made me go look for other answers. And then, I discovered, called lecithin and forks over knives and all of those, the documentaries that you discussed in the books that you were discussing. And when I discovered that, I started to think, well, it would have been nice to have been given a choice. Look, Adam, you could take the medications for the rest of your life, and, they're going to keep you alive, and these are going to be your symptoms, and, this is how your life will be on them. Or you could adopt a whole food plant-based diet, and in the majority of the cases, actually improve your health and actually could get you off medications. But you're going to need to change your lifestyle and your eating habits, but you're going to have this amazing energy, or you're going to feel really good, or you're going to look younger than you did when you had the heart attack. If I was given those two choices, then I would have the power to choose one. But I wasn't given that choice. I was only given one. And I think that's the missing link, is I believe everybody has the right to choose. And if someone wants to take meds for the rest of their life, that's cool. If someone wants to and has the drive to change their lifestyle, that's cool too. But there should be support for that person that wants to choose that route. And at the moment, that's not in the system.
It's an amazing point you make. And this is the sad fact that I'm generalising and may not be accurate about this, but I think most cardiologists would have no knowledge that a diet may be at least similar to the medicines that they give. We think, us plant-based people, understand it's probably better than the medicines, but they don't even think it might be similar. And there are great cardiologists who do think this. Dr. Kim Williams is one example of those cardiologists who are aware and may care, but many of them aren't. And he's coming this weekend to Brisbane, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a case study. I'm chatting.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, very good, very good. I think he's amazing because he's really cared about this, but there's another challenge. As powerful as Dr. Williams has been in the world, he's been president of the American College of Cardiologists. He's changing some, but not all. And it saddens me that many of my cardiologist colleagues would have no idea that whole foods plant-based nutrition could matter in this realm. That's again, no criticism of them. They're just not aware. Yeah. Just like when social media first started, some people were early adopters of it, and others, what's Facebook? Never heard of it. It's the same thing. And I guess what we've got to do is try and just get them to know that there's this opportunity to learn about it and find out that it might be as good. And then they can give you the option just like you wished for.
Yeah, totally. I'm looking forward to that day that we do have that option. So how are you personally, like on a day-to-day basis in your work, helping doctors become aware of this?
It's a little bit hard for me to do it in my career in intensive care, I'll be honest, because most of my patients are unconscious when I first see them. Yeah. They're receiving a nasogastric tube, which is how we feed them. This mixture is just being poured down a tube that goes into their nose and into their stomach. So it's a bit hard. I sometimes talk to the patients that look like they're interested before they leave to go to the ward. Sometimes we have a day or two while they've just recovered from having their breathing tube out and they're kind of getting better, but they can't, they're not quite well enough to go to the ward. Then I can sometimes raise the topic with them. Are you interested in hearing about how I think you could get better from nutrition? But that's rare. What I'm trying to do is by perhaps talking to other medical colleagues about this. When I get invited to give a talk at my hospital, I sometimes try and focus the topic on the area of health and well-being rather than some boring medicine that we might be interested in giving. So I'll try to steer it in that direction. And one of the most powerful things I ever did was about 3 years ago. I gave a talk at my hospital. I work at Frankston Hospital in Melbourne, and they asked. We have these things called grand rounds, where every doctor from the hospital comes at lunchtime on a Wednesday afternoon actually, and has a speech from one of the doctors in the hospital, usually about something that's interesting that might interest the other doctors. We're all in our silos really working on our own areas, but sometimes there's something that you might be able to tell your rest of your colleagues that might be valuable to them. And my boss, my director of the intensive care, said to me, Andrew, you keep going on about your work-life balance. Why don't you talk about work-life balance? And so I said, all right, I'll try that. I thought they'd all throw tomatoes at me by standing up talking about something that was more sort of human than medicine. But I ended up making the topic more about how I had become very stressed in my life, and I discovered all these things that had made me improve, one of which was plant-based nutrition. But I talked about mindfulness, I talked about sleep, I talked about exercise, and I've never had the feeling when I was giving a talk that people were listening to me so intently. The previous talks I'd done over the last 3 or 4 years before that, I'd often noticed people on their phones, scrolling through, on their computers. They're only half listening to you. But this time, as soon as I started telling my story, a bit like when I've heard you speak, it's really powerful to hear a story being told. I told them how I got worked up and I got all stressed, and I watched the phones go down, the laptop screens close, and they all just either looked at me or looked at my slides. And I'm not saying it was a great talk. I'm not saying that. It was more that the topic that I was presenting was something that was fascinating, or at least interesting to them to look at. And so I found that really profound. So I try now to always speak about these health and wellbeing topics and introduce nutrition and tell them my story. I can't show them evidence that it's going to really change their lives. I can show some evidence about it might change their patients' lives, but it's hard to really show that it's going to change their lives. But telling my story in that situation seems to work.
Yeah, it's interesting. People, they sort of connect with that stress level. A lot of people are working a lot. I mean, I was doing that before I had the heart attack. My life's totally different now. And I think, when people see that you were able to make that shift out of the experience that you're experiencing, which they're experiencing right now, people's ears prick up and they want to know how that can happen. And then that's best done through a story. So tell us, you were super stressed. Tell me about that. Like, what was your life like, 4 years ago? Super stressed. And what else? You went whole food plant-based, but you started talking about mindfulness. What's your day like now compared to what it was back then? And what was the process of change?
Well, literally, I blew up, as I might put in inverted commas, because I was a busy clinical doctor, as we call it, a bedside doctor doing a full-time clinical load, as you call it, where in the ICU we kind of do week on, week off. You don't have to work in the intensive care every day, but I did my stretch of we probably work 150 of the 365 days you were working in the intensive care, which is a pretty full load because they're long days. You're sometimes on call overnight, and you're seeing a lot of complicated sick people. You're giving compassion as much as you can. You can get there's this term we use now in medicine called compassion fatigue, where you get tired of caring all the time. And so I was doing my full-time load, but I was also, as I said before, doing a lot of academic research where we would be doing these massive randomized trials where we would study different interventions in intensive care to help the patients improve. My focus was nutrition, so we were doing studies on how to give the best nutrition through that nasogastric tube I talked before. And so that's busy work too. That's writing papers, writing grants, trying to get money to fund the research. These were big studies. These were sort of many thousands of patients in 50 or 60 intensive care units around Australia and New Zealand. We have this big group of colleagues all working together. I wasn't doing it all. I was just playing my part in it. But a lot of that was really busy and stressful. And that was the stuff I was doing at night after the ward round. You come home and you have dinner with the family. I had young kids at this stage, and I'd end up on my computer tapping away till 1, 2 in the morning, get to bed, 5 hours sleep will be okay, go back to work tomorrow and do it all again. And it was all a bit about me, and growing my sort of academic credibility, so I could get invited to give talks overseas and get more money to pay for the research. You don't make yourself rich doing this, but you make your research group become more rich and powerful by getting grants from the government, basically, to do the research. And so it was all just playing a big part, and I just got overstressed, and I started some perhaps bad coping mechanisms. So I did some things that I probably shouldn't have done, and it was just not right. And so basically I had to pull up stumps. No, it's more complicated than either of those. I perhaps don't want to go into the details just now, Adam, but I did some stuff that was silly. It was marriage threatening. It was career threatening. And in the end, I was faced with the truth that I was overburdened and doing some crazy things. So it was time to just stop what I was doing. So I literally, resigned abruptly from work and as I said, had 12 months off. And I've heard people say this. My friend Rich Roll, who I listen to his podcast, says this all the time. My best thinking had got me into a situation that now had me out of work with a young family. My marriage was a bit threatened, and I realised that I had to sort of sort things out. I was in a psychologist's office, as you might expect, and so I was looking at nutrition. And I remember one day my psychologist said to me, "Have you ever done meditation?" And I had done meditation. I'd done it when I was a child. My uncle was involved in an ashram in Victoria here, and he had taken me to a meditation session a few times. But I'd found that all a bit spooky. We did it with incense, and we chanted, and all these things that were a bit weird to a child. So I hadn't really followed that again. And so my psychologist said, "Have you ever done it?" I said, "Yes." But I said, "I haven't done it for a while." And she said, "Why don't you just take 3 breaths right now with me, and I want you to focus on breathing right in and right out." And so we did that. She said, "Go home and I want you to do that twice a day for the next week." And as simple as that sounds, that's how I began a meditation process. Then I found the apps like Headspace, which I use to do guided meditations, and way more now. I've done courses on meditation, and I found that very valuable. And just to focus also, we talked about my exercise before, which I started, I got back into running at that stage, which was an amazing version of mindfulness, and got me my body moving again. But the last one I wanted to finish on was sleep. I as I said before, getting 5 hours sleep was okay for me. I would probably average between 5 and 6, and I thought, okay, that's good. But then I started reading about sleep and how important that was. And, of course, doctors know it's important, but we don't value it in our current modern, way of living. So I just thought, I'm going to try a 30-day challenge of going to bed at 10 o'clock every night. And now many people might go to bed at 10 o'clock already and think that's late. But for me, going to bed at 1 o'clock, 10 o'clock was a big deal. And so I literally tried as hard as I could to close off the day at 10 and wake up when I could. I wasn't on call overnight for that month, that 30 days. And I just noticed the difference it made. It was earth-shattering how well I felt at the end of that month. Within a few days, I noticed I was waking up a little less tired. Within a week, I noticed that I was starting to there was this fog that was slowly lifting. By 2 weeks, the fog was right away, and I was starting to think and see clearly things that I'd never seen before. And after a month, I could talk more clearly. I was better at articulating what I wanted to say. I even noticed people would listen to me more. I could tell people were listening, like this guy actually matters now. And I reckon I'd been in this fog for like a decade of just sleep deprivation that I suspect many people are still in. I think many of the people walking around in our streets have no idea about this.
And you have no idea you're in that fog until the fog rises.
Yeah,
I've
absolutely.
been in that fog. I know what that feels like. And you have no idea you're in it until you start doing these practices like sleeping more and breathing and meditating and eating plants. And then all of a sudden the fog starts to lift and everything becomes clear and you realise you were in a fog. I'm sure there's heaps of people out there have no idea they're in a fog.
And it's sad that they don't. And every time you read the paper, there's some new article about how so-and-so gets 4 hours sleep a night. We've got a president of the US at the moment telling people he doesn't need sleep. I mean, that is one of the worst health information things that could be going around at the moment.
Totally inefficient. So you've adopted meditation and sleep and movement, obviously exercise. I notice you swim a bit in the morning, the dawn thing. Yep. And you're eating plant-based. So if somebody wants to get more balance in their life, what would be the things that you would suggest they start to incorporate? And how would they go about doing it?
I think it depends on the person, Adam, and I think, what they're already doing and, what motivates them the most. For me, to be honest, it was actually getting out and running again. When I was in this period where I was stressed after leaving work and not really sure what to do, I just literally started to take my kids to school and go for a jog around the park at the end of dropping them from school. And while that seemed so small, I can remember the feeling of just the sun on my back, running around the tan we have here in Melbourne, the Botanical Garden track. I'd run around that tan and I just feel like wow, this is actually okay. Life is going to be all right. And that really was a powerful motivator to make me want to keep doing exercise. And whilst I was reading about the nutrition, that started to come. So, but to answer your question, if someone's not moving much, it might be as simple as just going for a walk once a day. That could be enough to change things. If they want to start on the food part of it, and I think, you and I are very focused on the whole foods plant-based, my actual initial start was a green smoothie. I used to see these green smoothies in the health stores and at the market and think, who would drink that crap? Like salad in a drink. Like, it's hard enough eating a salad. Why would you put it in a drink? And so I've actually got one sitting here right now. I've started taking over the idea of drinking a green smoothie most days. Not every single day, because there's days when you're busy. But having a green smoothie is a great way to bring a whole variety of plants you probably aren't already eating into your daily diet. And so I found that the simplest thing. And I try to motivate people through the green smoothie. The other thing just you mentioned before was my swimming. I became friends having met them with the Happy Pair, these two great twins in Ireland who have got their own plant-based movement going.
Yeah, I followed them. They're awesome guys.
They are awesome, and they went and met them one time and did their swim rise, as they call it, which is a swim at sunrise in the morning. And I know you're a great swimmer. You're often on the beach. I see your Instagram too. Being at the sea, where the sea meets the land at sunrise is one of the most powerful things you can do. And so I started last February, on February the 1st, to see if I could I did every day of that month. And then I thought I'll extend it and see if I can do most of the days of this year is going down at sunrise to have a swim. And it has been so good to do that. It sounds like, sounds hard to get up early and go to the beach, but it's not hard at all. And, I'm not talking about doing a kilometre swim. I sometimes have a long swim, but most of them is just 100 strokes one way, 100 strokes back, and get out and just, look around and think, how beautiful is this? That sunrise over there, the water is fresh, and then you go back and get on with your day. And so that's another powerful way to start things.
Yeah, the sunrise thing for me is a big thing. I've got to be down at that beach most mornings on sunrise, and I have to dive into the ocean.
So do you do it literally most days?
Most days. I either surf at that time, or if there's no swell, I'll just jump into the ocean, swim up and down the beach for a couple of strokes. And sometimes I'll just jump in the ocean and just hang in there and float, and then get out and then go and have a coffee. But every day I don't miss it. And there's something magical about the energy at that time in the morning. I don't know what it is from a scientific point of view, but it just makes you feel good. And the rest of your day is just incredible. Like when you start your day that way, before, I get up before light, I meditate, then I go down the beach. And that's my routine every single day.
Well, look, that could be the most powerful thing we said in the whole interview, Adam, what you just said. I think if people could consider doing a brief meditation, it doesn't have to be brief, a meditation first, and then go and do something that's focused on exercise and nature, great way to start.
Totally. And it's interesting you talked about what happened to you in regards to when you started running, how you started to think that life's going to be okay. Like, I remember that feeling too when I started to run again. It was this, once I started to train for the Ironman and I started to run daily and started to increase that fitness, all of a sudden, about 2 Ks into a run, when I got to that fitness, at first I couldn't even run to the end of the block, It took me a long time to get to be able to run a couple of Ks, 5 Ks. But once I got to the 2 K mark, then all of a sudden this happiness just overwhelms you. And you're on this high for the rest of the day, this happiness that you can cope with anything, and the whole day is smooth. Now, if I don't exercise to that point every day now, I can drop down into that, life's okay, but it's not, I don't have that sense of confidence or certainty that I have if I exercise to a point where these endorphins kick in. And it's interesting that it's the antidote to depression, I think.
Well, so many of us, great thing to say, Adam, so many of us use coping mechanisms like alcohol, as you suggested before, or chocolate, as I sometimes do, or coffee. You mentioned coffee. I still like a coffee. Those things to kind of put a something in our body to give us a better mood, and yet we have a natural way to do it by using our bodies. And, but a lot of people laugh at the endorphins a little bit. Those people who don't like running will say, you endorphin, addicts, what would you, why would you want to run just to get that? Well, but if we can use that to help us when we do have some sort of mental health or physical health challenge, why not? I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, well, you know Osher?
Yep.
Yeah, well, with his mental health issues, he was saying to me that he had his doctors were able to get him off the meds and maintain him off the meds, but he had to do 3 things every day. His psychologist and doctor were working together. He had to eat a whole food plant-based diet because the microbiome that creates in the gut is the microbiome that tells you it's okay to be happy.
Yep.
Tells the brain it's okay to be happy. So number 1, it's already triggering things in his mind for happiness. Number 2, he had to work out to that point where the endorphins kicked in. And he said to me, Adam, he said, you do your run. He said, I just use kettlebells and it happens in like 10 minutes. And forget just like, at 2Ks on the run, it happens in like minutes with the kettlebells. And he said, I'm as high as a kite for the rest of the day. And then he said, I have to meditate. And he said, I've been able to maintain, they've been able to keep me off meds and keep me stable for a long time now. So it's pretty powerful stuff what you're talking about here, those 3 things. I teach them in my program, eat, move, and pause. So that eat plant-based, whole food, the way nature hands it to you. Move your body every single day until you feel happy. And number 3 is to pause, and I teach people just to breathe. There's lots of different meditations. But it's interesting that you started using the breath, and that made me smile because that's what I share with people as well. Just use the breath. Breathe in deeply into your stomach, in through your nose into the stomach, and then out through the nose, and do 4 rounds. And that's all it takes each day.
They're so simple, aren't they?
So simple.
We complicate things. I just read Osher's book. I loved his book telling us that whole story. And he finishes with a chapter basically telling people to do the same things that you've just described. And you obviously, preaching this, if I can use that word. And I'm trying through, podcasts and speeches and things to do the same thing. I think that the whole foods plant-based thing is hugely important. Getting our nutrition right by eating things that come from nature, that are mostly whole and that are minimally processed, and they're plants, basically. I think that is fantastic. But I think there's a boost if you do those other things you mentioned. The lifestyle component. A lot of the whole food plant-based movement is focused only on food. Yeah. And that's fine. That's fine because that's going to make a mammoth change to humans' health. But I think, as you think, if we can just take it even a step further and get that exercise, get that mindfulness, get sleep involved, yes, you are going to give your health an even bigger boost. I talk about whole foods plant-based being like the gold medal, and but whole foods plant-based with sleep, exercise, and mindfulness as being platinum level, and that's going to take you to another level of health. Totally,
man. So I want to chat to you about the New Normal project. How did that come about? What is it? And why do you do it?
It's a good question. The New Normal project is a name that my sister helped give it, basically, for an idea that all these things that we just talked about should be the new normal of way to live. That the sad Australian diet with a person who's stressed and not sleeping and not exercising, which is exactly what I put my hand up for being 6 or 7 years ago, that's the old way to live. And I think the new normal is the way you and many other people live, and me, I'm trying to. And I think, therefore, that's where the name came from. What happened was I had this amazing, my wife and I, Claire's involved with it as well. We both went through a pretty, tumultuous last 6 or 7 years as I got, basically out of my job and had to work myself way back. And we both went on this health journey together, and I'm incredibly pleased that she's supported me with all of my changes and basically done them with me. And some of them have been motivated more by her than me, which is why it's been great to do. We went to a retreat with Rich Roll, who I mentioned before, and his wife Julie Pyatt 2.5 years ago in Italy, where they take a bunch of 30 people and basically for a week you live this same lifestyle. Plant-based eating, cooked by or prepared by Julie Pyatt. She's a cook like you in plant-based eating. Rich takes you for a run, you do meditation, you do all these amazing tea ceremonies and just spiritual type focus without being overblown with the spiritual stuff. It's more about just healthy living. And we went on this retreat, and at the end of it, we had to sort of give a thing that we wanted to focus on for the next period of time. And I'd always been interested in podcasting, actually, and I said to the whole group, and we all sat around in a circle and said, what are we going to do? I said, I want to start a podcast. I've been really enamored with Rich Roll's podcast. I just love everything that he does. I've been listening to that avidly for about 2 years before then. And so I thought, I want to start a podcast. And so that sat in the back of my mind. And then Rich and Julie were going to come to Australia to do a retreat, another one in Perth at that time. It never happened. But we said to them, how about you come to Sydney and Melbourne and we'll put on an event with you. And so that happened back in 2017. We had these events back in Paddington Town Hall and then in Malvern Town Hall, where we got Rich and Julie, and Andrew Spudfit Taylor was one of the speakers as well. And we did these fantastic events. And around the time we thought, well, let's get that podcast going. And so Claire and I sat together and started a podcast. We interviewed Rich and Julie as our first sort of interview, and that's where the New Normal started. It was also the name of the organisation that ran the events, and we tried to continue that since. We haven't done a lot of events. We started for a little while with what we call the New Normal Sunday event, where we would take people in Melbourne and just give them a morning on a Sunday, which involved a green smoothie, like I showed you before, some yoga, a session of mindfulness, and a brief run or walk. Just a way to do more than just one thing altogether in a New Normal Sunday, as we called it. So we've been doing events like that. Last year, I lost my dad in 2018, this last year, and so it's been a bit slow the last year because that was pretty. I got involved in his healthcare, and then afterwards, you sort of lose your creativity for a little while. So we've been a bit on the back burner with the New Normal project for the last 12 months, but it's about to have a big boost. We just released a couple of new podcasts just before Christmas, and it's going to hopefully brew throughout this year, and we hope to get some more events happening, and basically stuff around a healthy lifestyle. That's really what I want to promote, without overbearing people and telling them they have to be vegan and they have to be this. Just invite them to try things that might make these lifestyle factors more prominent in their own lives.
Yeah, awesome work, man. It's so good.
Thanks.
I
That's great.
feel like I found a kindled spirit. Like, seriously, hearing your story, and your journey, and, how you balance your life out with sleep and movement and eating and meditation. I'm going, gosh, like, there's very few people on the planet that actually really live a lifestyle like that. So it's good to connect with you, man, and have a chat.
Thanks, Adam. No, you inspired me. Don't worry. When I heard you speak a couple of years ago, it really moved me. And you're a very good speaker. You're a very good speaker. I want to say that. And you have a way of making it more than just the food. As much as you're a chef, and you talk about food, I get that feeling that you are about lifestyle. And I think that's so important, as we've talked about so many times already in this interview, that we've got to be doing the whole lot. And so I agree. Great to chat with you. What you're doing with the whole I Feel Good movement, and then now this magazine is just awesome. I mean, I've only just signed up for your magazine just recently, but that's brilliant. Really, you've got some awesome things in there.
And I actually started that about 5 or 6 years ago. Might have been even longer ago.
Wow.
Because I'd started eating this way, I started to put just little meal plans together as I was learning, and we're up to issue 300. You're going to be in issue probably 301, I think. We've had over 540,000 people download the app over the last 5 or 6 years. It's been 5 years. It's been amazing. So it's been going a long time. I just haven't shared it so much, and people have only come through it through seeing it in Apple iTunes. But we rank, if you type in the word vegan in Australia, we rank number 3 for the word vegan. Yeah, and, so thanks, man. I just want to share this knowledge with people like you do to give people a choice, Here's another way that you can eat and live. And if you're interested in a plant-based diet, these are the principles.
Yep.
It's easy to put dishes together like this. And, it's pretty easy to go move your body and you'll feel good. And if you stop and breathe.
Look as good as you.
Sorry?
If you look as good as you, it's fantastic. I've seen those photos of you before your transformation, your heart attack, and to see where you are now, it's just amazing. If people can't be inspired by stories like yours, then they're probably never going to be inspired, really. And I think you are doing amazing work with this. Keep it up. Keep doing all your talks. Keep your magazine, and keep teaching about all of this.
Thanks, mate. Well, I look forward to seeing you down in Melbourne for the.
Are you coming to the Nutrition and Healthcare Conference?
Yeah, I'm going to come down.
Awesome. Good.
Yeah, we'll catch up then in person.
Excellent. That'll be awesome.
Yeah. So, mate, thank you so much for being here, sharing your knowledge. Is there anything else that you want to share with anybody before we wrap up?
I can't think of anything. We talked about Doctors for Nutrition, which is the new passion as a group for all of us. And just, I guess, if people want to listen to the podcast, New Normal Project, it's on iTunes and on all the other podcast apps. We've got a website, newnormalproject.com.au, where the podcast's located, and a few blog pieces and things. And we're hoping to build that over the next 12 months. So I'd love people to come along. We're on Instagram, New Normal Project, that handle, and love to see anybody who wants to follow.
Excellent, mate. And I'll put all your links in the magazine so people can follow you, and also on our website.
Awesome.
So, guys, follow him. He's doing good stuff, He's changed his life. He's gone if you're in a high-pressure job, stressed out, like I was, that ended up in a heart attack, like Andrew was, and shifted his life, saved a lot of things by the sounds of it in his life, and switched his life around, and he's living. How are you feeling now? Are you in a good space?
Oh, absolutely. I look back now and think, how could I have been in that world that I chose to live in? And this is the point, perhaps if I could make one last point, it's that we choose a lot of these habits or behaviours in our lives. We shouldn't be blaming other people or our genes or society, whatever. We shouldn't be. It's us. We choose so much of what we do. And I chose to be a doctor on this conveyor belt that was working too hard, with a young family, not caring about them. And then I chose some bad behaviour as well. But now I'm choosing good health through great eating, exercise, mindfulness, sleep, and I feel $1 million. So that's what I want people to try to choose to do if they can.
Awesome. Great message to finish on, mate. Mate, it was awesome having you. Thanks for being here and chatting with me and sharing your knowledge.
Good one. Thanks, Adam. Really appreciate it. Keep up your great work.